Ironically, focusing on the submissiveness of wives hasn't led us to having more respectable male leaders. There needs to be something there worthy of respect. Wifely submission. Should wives obey their husbands? Isn't that a bit outdated? I mean, women aren't kept at home anymore, right? Now, the vast majority of people who have heard commentary on this teaching have heard it from middle-aged to older men. So I figure I ought to milk the thing I'm best at, which is effortlessly existing as a female, and bring forth my own commentary on this, that perhaps those men up on pulpits might find satisfactory, and share with those who would appreciate a woman's voice on this matter. Let's begin with one of the readings which inspires this wifely submission, which I have firsthand seen turn extremely toxic within Christian communities and families. From Ephesians chapter 5. Brothers and sisters, live in love as Christ loved us. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church and handed himself over for her to sanctify her, cleansing her by the bath of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. So also husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one hates his own flesh, but rather nourishes and cherishes it, even as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. For this reason a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak in reference to Christ and the church. There's quite a bit to unpack here, but let's begin with the core of this dilemma, about whether or not men are the leaders of their home and family. You can try to say that, no, this isn't the issue, that the defiance of this concept is somehow about equal respect. But it's not. Both parties are owed respect, but that doesn't invalidate the fact that someone's got to be the leader. So why, in our modern times, with women as capable and running in the same circles, ought the leader to be the husband versus the wife? What if he's an abusive brute? I'll get into that. Now, women will bristle at the idea that they ought to be submissive to their husbands, but I never quite understood why. You see, nature clearly indicates that there can be but one highest leader above small groups of others, which is what a family is, a tiny tribe. And while women are the generals of their home, their husbands are still the presidents. Pointing this out isn't to somehow say that women are lesser than men. It's simply pointing out that the natural leader within a family unit is the bigger, stronger one who can more easily physically defend against invaders and who has been charged with the responsibility to provide for the family. Women, if they are not working for money outside the home, still provide, but in order to get the raw materials to create what provides and nourishes others, she still relies on someone working to gain access to that ability to provide. Insofar as men not being allowed input, imagine a person working and then not being the one who has a final say as to how the money is spent. Imagine thinking someone else should give you all their money and that you are not entitled to a voice in how it is spent. I'm looking at you, U.S. government. Yes, women can work and bring money into a home, but men were specifically charged with toiling. It is their obligation. For women in a family unit, it's morally optional. The men, quite honestly, got the short straw when it comes to existence. Yes, I can already hear the screeching, since this is a concept that's not widely accepted. Men are the privileged ones. After all, it's not them who go off to war, work the most dangerous jobs, and have the obligation to provide for the mouths they create. Oh, wait. Personally, I greatly enjoy being a female and routinely remind my husband that his existence must be just awful. Yes, I know, you're already considering those countries where women are treated subhuman. With all that just happened in Afghanistan, it's been on my mind a lot too. The quick answer to this is to point out that it's a culture that doesn't have specific values that are championed within Christian culture. This lecture is about submissiveness of wives within Christian culture based on scripture. Men throughout history have held the highest authoritative roles. Yes, there are exceptions to the rule, but that's what they are, exceptions. Why do you think mostly men being in these roles has been the case throughout all of history? It's because men were the ones who physically fought others, defending or implementing a way of life. So why would it be any different to have the burden of final leadership not be placed on the male? Now, just because men have been in the most prominent leadership roles throughout all of history, that doesn't mean that it was expected that men treat women as lesser beings. Leaders are still human and oftentimes become leaders by nefarious means, but that doesn't mean that their title of leader automatically comes with the perks of oppressing women. It should actually have been the opposite, as true leaders are servants of those they lead. What people miss is that women are still the ones who run everything. Women control the vibe of the home and relationship. Women still have more power than men do in their own homes because women are the ones designed to make things happen and better understand the importance of intricacies. You can say that women ought to have equal leadership in the outside world, but that argument shouldn't ignore the fact that by our domestic life, whether we work outside the home or not, we run the world. We control the vibe of the home. We control the vibe of societal romantic expectations. We control the vibe of culture. That is some power. We got a bunch of men to wear wigs and tights, guys. Come on. Come here, baby. This will look great on you. Yeah, that'd be great. That is some power. And it's more power than men will ever have. We run this mother. If women have lost influence, it's because the modern woman denies how powerful she is in the most natural ways. We're the naturally physically alluring ones. We control the actual propagation of the human race. We can create life. Men are in the types of positions of power that they are because of natural biological advantages. But you must remember, the king will flounder without his advisors because he doesn't actually run his kingdom. Women know the inner workings of their domestic life, and we are charged with running it smoothly because we're better capable. Now, once again, are there exceptions to this? Of course, but once again, that's what they are, exceptions. Now, a woman can make the personal argument that if so-and-so would have obeyed her abusive husband, such and such would have happened. Okay, but you are missing all of the points. Wifely submission within Christian cultures comes from the Ephesians readings, yes? Women bristle at the idea of obeying their husbands and admitting to their leadership because women have been told by secular society that, yes, has seeped greatly into Christian culture, that by doing so, we have given up control and by some merit, personal freedom and rights. They equate submission as some form of slavery, when it's not. Is a general a slave to a president? Have they less human rights? Now, while St. Paul tells women to be submissive to their husbands, most people seem to miss all of the rest of it. Husbands are told to love their wife as Christ loved the church. What did Christ do for the church? He was scourged and died. Like, if you compare wife's expectations to husband's expectations, women are getting off easy. Men are expected to sacrifice themselves to the extreme, safeguarding their wives as themselves. And what's more, in loving them how Christ loved the church, husbands are expected to do this even if the wife does not love the husband. Just as Christ sacrificed himself for the church is made up of those who do not love Christ perfectly, not even close. But the husband is charged with the duty to emulate Christ's suffering and passion, whether his wife deserves him to or not. You see, it's not a matter of, oh, husbands can be self-sacrificing if their wives are respectful. No, you have to do it anyway. And you do it in the face, even of disrespect. The wife still gets the perk of the husband laying down himself for her, despite being imperfect. He is called to love her as perfectly as possible, as his duty. Now, of course, we're all called to love one another as Christ loves, But get the point. A man is called to offer up himself for the cleansing and sanctification of his wife. His life becomes about doing what he must to make his family holy. His mission is to lead his family to sanctification and salvation. That is why the husband is the spiritual leader of the household, even though it's more likely that the woman is the more spiritual or religious one. Children subconsciously understand that their fathers are the leaders, which is why it's so harmful for women to take fathers away from their children, and thus actual abuse is taking place. I've seen a lot of good men have to settle for 50% custody or less because the mother of their children decides she's just not into the relationship anymore. She decides snide remarks are downright abuse. But that's a whole other issue. An issue about how children are robbed of seeing true leadership in action, and now our society's fallen apart. Now, I said I'd address this. The point isn't that men ought not be leaders because they are lacking. It's that men aren't stepping up to their natural role as leaders. The very first thing a husband should do in order to lead is to love his wife. That is, love her more than himself and put her even before their children. This example is vital for an emotionally healthy family and to encourage their children to end up in a healthy relationship themselves. The need for spouses to do this for the good of their children is another video I'll get to. So if a man does not love his wife, devoting his very existence to her well-being as the first step as head of the household, he is not acting like a true leader. Does that mean wives ought to divorce their husbands immediately? Absolutely not. Honestly, if you take a look around, the quality of men isn't so high anymore. Men have had their natural masculinity beat down and told by women that they don't need them. They take refuge in pornography due to rejection and thusly lose all ability to love a woman at all. And listen, this is very important. It's a horrible, slippery slope when a male feels rejected and disrespected, and his self-concept that he isn't worthy of respect then becomes self-fulfilling. He's told he's not a leader, so don't even bother trying. But men are born to lead. Not everyone, but their own tribe. Even in a relationship where the female is an alpha female, unless her husband, alpha or not, steps up to the plate and makes her feel protected and provided for, there's going to be an issue. Men must first lead by loving and nurturing their wives. And this is what we ought to be focusing on in Christian culture, as well as culture in general. Instead of simply telling men they are incapable and not worthy of respect or opportunity because they are dispensable and I am woman, hear me roar. Ironically, focusing on the submissiveness of wives hasn't led us to having more respectable male leaders. There needs to be something there worthy of respect. Men say that they want submissive wives, but the reality is that a submissive wife is an impossibility if she hasn't a husband who acts like a leader. The reality is that a man cannot have a submissive wife if his wife needs to rise to the role of leader in a home. A woman cannot then be submissive to her helpmeet. The clincher is that more and more often men do not want to be the household leaders, since being a leader isn't fun. Being a leader requires self-sacrifice, and honestly, it's the short end of the stick. Men don't want the short end of the stick due to our naturally indulging desires, so they sit back and have their wives rise to the role of domestic leader and complain then that their wives are not submissive to them. What are wives expected to be submissive to? That's when the concept of submissiveness gets muddled and confused. Being a submissive wife does not mean being a slave who does whatever you want. It does not mean that she is not allowed a mind, opinion, or feelings, or that she must agree with whatever the man of the house wants. No, it means that she is a helpmeet to a leader. Being a leader requires that you be a provider and protector, that you love your wife in a self-sacrificial way. If you do not do these things, you are either not a leader or a poor leader. If you are not a good leader, You cannot expect a wife to be submissive to you, since you cannot be trusted to put the good of your family above yourself. No, she who must rise to the task of leadership because her husband does not, is then rendered incapable of being submissive to him. He cannot make the calls. He cannot run the ship. He is no longer the captain because he has thrust his wife into this role out of laziness or sheer inability to lead. And our society isn't exactly approving of authentic male leadership at this moment. So a typical man's inability to lead is mostly due to that. They never learned. The best chance they've got is a strong, personal male role model. And our nation's young men aren't getting any. But men, if you ask yourself why your wife isn't submissive, you might do better to ask yourself, am I a loving provider and protector? These things include emotional, mental, physical, financial, and spiritual health and safety. If you are not, then it is unfair to expect your wife to be driven to treat you with the respect you desire. After all, she is too busy filling her role. It is also the leader who's expected to sacrifice themselves for the good of those whom they serve. Therefore, men ought to step up to be the ones to sacrifice their bodies, their well-being, before he lets a woman take that place. A real man wouldn't expect a woman to suffer when she wouldn't if he did. That's manliness 101. It comes right back down to men being expected to love their wives as their own bodies. I have 2 other videos that touch down on this topic. The most popular video I've ever made is about what men really want. Women, I encourage you to view that. And men, I encourage you to view its counter video, what women truly want. So, what are you going to do? What's your role? What's your mission? I'm Regina Lux with Veritas on the Rocks. Now, ignite the truth and boldly go. Fun thing, the head of our household brought our baby to me as I was writing this. He had changed her, fed her, and did all those things so I wouldn't have to and could focus on this video. That's some true leadership. Because to be a good leader, you must also be a servant.